Welcome everyone, Dadhichi here from astrology.com.au with, as you can see, the Vedic horoscope of Hillary Clinton, which some time ago, even up to a year ago, I had said would be successful in securing not only the presidential nomination, but also the election on November 8th. And right now, I must say that even I was a little bit nervous about that prediction, given the resuscitation of the email scandal, which we had all thought had gone away. Recently we see the laptop of her assistant and ex-husband, Senator Weiner, who apparently has 350,000 emails on that machine, which raises the question again. And if we look here at the horoscope, just cutting to the chase here, this is her birth horoscope. Here, this particular box indicates the life cycle. We notice that from the 23rd of October, well, actually this is a 6-year cycle of the sun, within which we have sub-cycles, and the North Node is occurring under this. Initially we see that from the position of the rising sign and the position of the sun, same sign of Libra here, that this North Node or Rahu is in the 8th house. That would, to a very large extent, account for a lot of the so-called secrets and the difficulties she's having. The 8th house is never a good place, according to most astrologers, both East and West. However, we need to note that this position of Rahu being placed in Taurus means it is exalted. Here, although the sun in Libra is debilitated, being near to Venus, and we'll notice here that Venus is sufficiently far away from the sun as to avoid what is considered combustion. Sun, by virtue of being in the angle with Venus, receives a cancellation of that debilitation, which is called Nichabanga Raja Yoga. So in fact, this planet, which appears to be troublesome, is in fact quite strong. And the planet in the 8th house, although being in the 8th house, is also rendered very, very powerful. Now, the interesting thing too, which a lot of astrologers forget, is that we must look at these planets with reference, number one, to the moon, and also to the cycle ruler, which we've already done because the cycle ruler is the same as the rising sign. Incidentally, from the rising sign, this Rahu, this North Node, becomes the lord of the 5th house, one of the best houses of the horoscope, lord of the 5th, exalted in the 8th house. So notwithstanding the problem she's encountering here, also note that Rahu is in the star of the sun. So there's a very, very powerful link between these two planets. Not just here, but I'm going to go a little bit further on that. Suffice to say that from the moon, it actually rules the lunar sign, being the sign of Aquarius, exalted in the 4th house, fully aspecting the 10th house from the moon. And if we look a little bit closely here, we see that the sub period, which is Ketu, or the south node, from the position of the moon, occurs in the 10th house, receiving that full aspect from the exalted Rahu. So here we see some very powerful testimonies that between the 23rd of October 2016 and the 11th of November, incidentally, these are, of course, karmic planets, very, very powerful karma. And of course we have Jupiter here, which is not friendly. Again, that is causing some problems, I would say, to her, and that would account for this backlash from the emails. And a lot of hidden stuff coming up, no doubt about that, people questioning her ethics and her standards, which is very much an 8th house issue. But take a look down here as well. The 10th harmonic chart, which we call Dashamsha, which shows us the career of the person, again is indeed intimately linked here by sign to the 10th house, the natural signs, but also from the ascendant to the 7th house. Now, these are not generally considered good positions for Rahu and the Sun, but given the virtue of their strength here in the horoscope, unusual sorts of strengths in difficult houses, through cancellation, they do occupy the 7th house of the general public, and therefore that is, to my way of thinking, something that's going to a large extent, help her on the date of that election. Now, we also see in this Dashamsha chart the position of Venus in the 11th house from the Dashamsha ascendant in its own sign. This would be generally a fortifying aspect for her life generally, but you can see that this next sub period, what we call the Antara period, is of course of Venus. And here in the Rasi chart, or the birth chart, Venus is indeed in its own sign, here in its own sign, but unfortunately in the star of Jupiter, which is not considered good. However, it is, pardon me, in the 2nd house of gains. It's around this time that the inauguration would take place. So you do have to look at what is happening after this. This position here elevates her. Incidentally, when we look at the Sun and the position of Rahu, you notice here that the Sun star is Swati, which is ruled by Rahu, and Rahu's star is Kartika, ruled by the Sun. So here we see a very, very powerful, what's called Nakshatra Parivartana Yoga. In other words, there is a mutual exchange by stellar position. And although the 8th house is not good, I'm also going to go out on a limb here and say that there may be some sort of underhanded methodologies here which will be at play in helping elevate Hillary Clinton to the position. Notice here too, Saturn in the 10th house is not considered by astrology to be a great position. It can in some cases indicate a severe fall from grace. But I remind you of the same sort of Saturn-Mars conjunction in her 10th house, which occurred in the horoscope of Muhammad Ali, the famous greatest boxer, and there's no doubting that he was a true fighter and was able to fight his way out of even the most difficult circumstances, which is what we're seeing here with Hillary Clinton. So here, according to this, although they're rather unusual and maybe not particularly orthodox ways of looking at the horoscope, I would say that this, to me, indicates success, and also by virtue of these sub-periods and sub-sub-periods and the order in which they occur. We see here the health is not good, the debilitation of the Sun, irrespective of its cancellation of debilitation, is also, it has to be considered as the 11th lord for the sign of Libra, which is obstructive karmically. There's some very strong karmic issues associated here. But on the day of the election, what I noticed, and I mentioned this in one of my previous posts and newsletters, is that you can see the similar positioning of the ascendant in Washington at sunrise on the day of the election, and the placement of the planets Sun and Mercury in the same position in the same ascendant on that particular day. Jupiter ahead of these planets at the time of birth, behind these planets. And incidentally, Jupiter is in the 11th house to its own position on the day of the election. So that to me is also very interesting. It's almost like the clock has shifted and turned in a position that is favouring her in this respect. Let's take a look here at the 10th Lord, which is the moon. On the day that 10th Lord moon is in the star of Mars, Dhanishta, and Mars on the day of the election is exalted in the 4th house, fully aspecting the 10th house. It doesn't gain directional strength there, but its exaltation is very, very powerful. We also have to look at the cycle rulers here, the Sun. Here it's in the ascendant again. By being in the angle, it gains some strength there. Yet it is in the star of Vishaka, which is in the 12th house. Now, that too would indicate losses being the 12th house. However, I should remind you that Jupiter, for this ascendant at the time of sunrise, ruling the 3rd and the 6th house, this ruler of the 3rd and 6th, when relegated to the 12th, is disempowered to do bad. This is called Viparit. Viparit essentially means it neutralises some of the negativity very much in the same way that we would see mathematically a negative times a negative is positive. So here we see, also on the day of the election, what I consider some positive benefits to her. The sub-ruler, Rahu, look at that in the 11th house of gain and fulfillment. And the sub-lord in the 5th house, not far away from the lunar birth position. So I'm going to continue along with what I suggested previously, but I think on the day, by hook or by crook, take that to mean what you will, I believe Hillary Clinton is imminently the next president of the US and the first female president at that. Take care. Thanks for joining me. See you soon. Bye-bye.